My name's Jolia, and I grew up believing my life was a fairy tale. I was the only daughter of a woman everyone in our city called the Queen Without a Crown. She wasn't royalty, but she might as well have been. My mother, or the woman I thought was my mother, was one of the richest billionaires in the country. She owned hotels, factories, entire blocks of real estate. People bowed when she walked into a room. And me? I was the little princess. Silk dresses, private tutors, chauffeurs waiting outside my school in glossy black cars. On paper, I had everything a girl could want. But here's the thing no one tells you. All the money in the world can't buy you warmth. My so-called mother, Clarissa, wasn't exactly the nurturing type. To her, I was more of an investment than a daughter. She groomed me to marry up, into political families, old money dynasties, or tech heirs who could strengthen her empire. Love? That wasn't on her checklist, but fate doesn't care about checklists, because when I was 19, I fell in love. And not with a billionaire's son, not with some Ivy League golden boy. No, I fell in love with the janitor. The first meeting? His name was Arham. I met him one morning in the gardens of our estate. I had snuck out barefoot, escaping one of Clarissa's endless etiquette lessons, and wandered toward the fountain. He was there, sweeping the marble pathway, earbuds in, humming to himself. When he saw me, he froze, clearly panicked, probably worried he'd get fired for being caught slacking off. But then he smiled. And it wasn't the fake smile I got from every rich suitor at charity galas. It was real, warm, morning, he said simply, like I wasn't some untouchable heiress, but just a girl. That moment stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I found excuses to cross paths with him. Sometimes I'd forget my book near the garden. Sometimes I'd sneak down to the staff quarters just to hear his laugh. He was funny, sharp, and far braver than anyone I knew. He spoke to me like I was human, not porcelain. Before I knew it, friendship turned into something deeper. Secret walks, stolen conversations, glances that lingered too long. And then one night, under the lantern lights in the garden, he kissed me. That kiss felt more real than all the riches in the world. My mother's discovery, of course, secrets don't stay hidden forever, especially not in a mansion crawling with servants, cameras, and Clarissa's watchful eyes. She found out. One evening, she called me into her study. The air smelled of cigars and leather, and her face was tighter than usual, lips pressed into a line. On her desk lay a folder. Inside were photos of me and Arham together. "I'll ask you once, Jolia," she said coldly. "Is this true?" My heart hammered, but I didn't deny it. "Yes, I love him." The laugh she gave still chills me to this day. Low, sharp, humorless. "Love?" She spat. "You're a billionaire's daughter. You don't love the help. You use them until you find someone worthy of you." I tried to argue, to explain, but she cut me off. "Enough. End it now, or I will." The bribe. But Arham wasn't easily scared. The next day, my mother summoned him to her office. I wasn't there, but he told me everything later. She offered him a suitcase full of money, enough to buy a house, maybe two, and vanish forever. His answer? He pushed the suitcase back across the desk. "I don't want your money," he told her. "I want your daughter." That was the moment he signed his own death warrant, because Clarissa wasn't used to being told no. The trap-it happened fast, too fast. One morning, men in black suits stormed into the staff quarters. They dragged Arham out in handcuffs while the workers watched in shock. The accusation? Theft. Embezzlement. Crimes that sounded so ridiculous I thought it was some kind of sick joke. But it wasn't a joke. Within days, my mother had built an entire case. Forged documents, fake witnesses, even planted evidence. And just like that, Arham was sentenced. I'll never forget the last time I saw him in that courtroom. His eyes searched for mine as the judge declared him guilty. I wanted to run to him, to scream, to tell everyone it was a lie. But my mother's hand gripped my shoulder like a claw, pinning me in place. And just like that, the boy I loved was gone. The forced marriage, it didn't take her long to tighten the noose around me too. Within weeks, she arranged my marriage to a man twice my age, a banking heir whose family's fortune conveniently merged with ours. The wedding was rushed, extravagant, suffocating. I stood at the altar in a designer gown, my smile painted on, my heart breaking inside. Everyone called it the wedding of the year. To me, it felt like a funeral. I thought that was the end of my story, that my mother had won and I was doomed. to live out her script. But life has a way of tearing masks off monsters. Because what I didn't know, what would only come years later, was that Clarissa wasn't my real mother at all. And when the truth came out, everything changed. It's strange how you can live in the same house as someone for 20 years and never truly know them. After my forced marriage, I thought I had lost everything: Aram, my freedom, even myself. My new husband was exactly what my so-called mother wanted: wealthy, powerful, and just as cold as she was. I became an ornament in his life, a trophy wife who smiled for photographs and kept quiet in private. But grief has a way of sharpening your instincts. And deep down, something about Aram's case never sat right with me. The whispers in the halls started with whispers. The staff in our mansion had always feared Clarissa, but fear loosens tongues when no one is watching. I'd catch fragments of conversations when I walked by, maids whispering about forged papers, gardeners murmuring about the poor boy who never stole a thing. One night, I confronted one of the older servants, a woman who had been with us for decades. Her hands shook as she poured my tea. "Miss Jolia," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder, "your mother. She did it. She paid them all off. The boy never stole a thing. Everyone knows it." Her words hit me like ice water. I wanted to scream, but instead I swallowed the truth and played the dutiful daughter, because now I understood. Clarissa's power wasn't just in her wealth. It was in the fear she sowed. Everyone knew, but no one dared say a word. A stranger with answers. The second crack in her facade came years later. I was 22, 3 years into my loveless marriage, when a stranger approached me outside a charity event. He was older, with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel. He pressed a sealed envelope into my hand before slipping back into the crowd. Inside were photocopies of documents, birth records, legal papers, things that made no sense until I saw the last page, my birth certificate, only. Clarissa's name wasn't on it. Instead, it listed another woman, a name I had never heard before. I stared at it for hours, my hands trembling. If Clarissa wasn't my mother, then who was she? And why had she lied all these years? The journal, the final piece, came from a place I least expected, my late father's study. One stormy night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the locked room I had avoided for years. Among his old books and ledgers, I found a worn leather journal. His handwriting sprawled across the pages, filled with notes about business deals, politics, and one entry that made my blood run cold. Clarissa is not Holia's real mother. I promised her birth mother I'd protect her, but Clarissa has tightened her grip on everything. If anything happens to me, I fear Jolia will never know the truth. I dropped the journal, my heart hammering so loudly I thought it might burst. It all made sense now. Clarissa had married my father for money and control. She had taken me in, not out of love, but because having a daughter gave her leverage. I was never her child. I was her pawn. And when she saw me fall in love with Arham, she destroyed him, not just because he was poor, but because he threatened the empire she had built on lies. The reunion, I never expected fate, however, has a twisted sense of timing. When I was 24, I heard news that shook me to my core. Arham was being released. After years in prison, new evidence had surfaced, a witness recanting their testimony, documents proving inconsistencies. The case collapsed, and he walked free. The world had moved on. People barely remembered his name. But for me, it was like a ghost had come back to life. I couldn't stop myself. I tracked him down. When I finally saw him again, he was standing outside a small cafe, older, harder, his once boyish face now sharpened by years of pain. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Arham," I whispered. His eyes met mine, and I saw recognition flash, followed by anger, hurt, and something else. "Jolia," he said flatly. "What do you want?" I wanted to collapse into his arms, to beg for forgiveness. But all I could do was tell him the truth, that I knew now, that I wasn't Clarissa's daughter, that I wanted to make it right. At first, he didn't believe me. Why would he? To him, I was the girl who had stood silently while his life was destroyed. But as I showed him the documents, the journal, the proof of Clarissa's betrayal, not just to him, but to me, his expression changed. The fury in his eyes wasn't just for me anymore. It was for her, and in that moment, I knew we weren't just broken lovers anymore. We were allies, allies with one shared mission: revenge. When Aram and I sat across from each other in that dim cafe, there was no fairy tale reunion, no sweeping embrace. There was only silence heavy with years of betrayal. I sipped my untouched coffee, my fingers trembling against the cup. He stared. At me. His eyes hardened. But beneath the anger, I saw the boy I had once loved. I lost 7 years of my life because of her, he said finally, his voice sharp as glass. 7 years, Jolia. Do you know what that feels like? I do, I whispered, because in a way, I lost them too. Maybe not behind bars, but in a cage all the same. He didn't respond, but the tension in his jaw softened slightly. And that was enough. Enough for me to know he might, just might, let me stand beside him again. The fire inside. Us over the weeks that followed, I met with him in secret. At first, it was awkward, strained. He didn't trust me fully, and part of me couldn't blame him. But slowly, our conversations shifted from the past to the future. Clarissa had built her empire on lies, manipulation, and fear. And she had stolen too much from both of us. The fire inside us grew into a shared vow. We would tear her down, brick by brick, until the world saw the monster behind the billionaire's smile. The weak spot's revenge isn't about rage. It's about patience, strategy, precision, and Clarissa, for all her cunning, had weak spots. Her reputation, she thrived on being admired by high society. Charities, galas, magazine covers. She had to look untouchable. Her businesses, hotels, factories, offshore accounts. She had enemies in the shadows, partners she had cheated. People who would gladly help us if they got something in return. Her secrets, and most importantly, her biggest lie, that I was her daughter. If the world learned the truth, her perfect image would crack wide open. Aram and I decided to strike at all three. Gathering allies. One thing I had learned in my gilded cage: money buys silence, but silence breeds resentment. Clarissa's empire wasn't held together by loyalty, it was stitched together by fear. We started small. An ex-employee who had been wrongfully fired, a journalist who had once tried to expose her shady dealings but was shut down with hush money, a rival businessman she had bankrupted through dirty tricks. We brought them together, one by one, feeding them pieces of evidence, connecting the dots. The circle grew. What was once just two broken lovers became an underground network of people who had been waiting years for a chance to strike back. Playing pretend on the surface, I kept playing the role of the dutiful daughter, attending events with her, smiling for photographs, letting her believe she still had control over me. But behind closed doors, I was leaking her secrets, financial records stolen from her office, recordings of her threats to business partners, even personal letters that revealed the cruelty she hid so well. Each piece was another nail in her coffin. The spark, the plan was simple: expose her corruption to the public, destroy her reputation among the elites, take back everything she had stolen: money, power, even me. But Arham wanted something more. She took years of my life, he said one night, his eyes burning. I don't just want her ruined. I want her to feel what I felt, trapped, powerless, forgotten. And in that moment, I realized our revenge wasn't just about justice. It was about balance. She had caged us both. Now it was her turn to live in a cage of her own making. The bait. The first strike came in the form of a leak. A scandalous article appeared in one of the country's leading papers, detailing insider fraud, shell companies, tax evasion. Every word backed by real documents we had slipped to the journalist. Clarissa was furious, of course. She called it slander, threatened lawsuits, demanded retractions. But for the first time in my life, I saw something new in her eyes. Fear. It was a spark, and we weren't done yet. The plan in motion. The leaks grew bigger. Anonymous tips to the media. Whispers spread at elite parties. Investors pulled out. Politicians distanced themselves, and through it all, I stayed close, smiling at her side, pretending to be her loyal daughter while secretly watching her empire burn. But the final blow, the one that would truly break her, was still to come. Because soon the world would learn the truth, that she wasn't my mother at all, and when that mask fell, she wouldn't just lose her power, she'd lose everything. Clarissa had always been untouchable. Or at least, she believed she was. For decades, she controlled every headline, every photograph, every whisper in the city's elite circles. She thought her money could erase anything: theft, betrayal, even love. But even empires built on lies eventually collapse. and Aram and I, we were the earthquake. The Grand Gala Clarissa's annual charity gala was her favorite stage, a glittering night of chandeliers, champagne, and cameras flashing like fireworks. It was where she showcased her power, where she paraded me like a prized possession. This year, she was particularly desperate. The leaks had damaged her reputation, and she wanted to show the world she was still in control. She spared no expense: celebrities, politicians, tycoons. It was the event of the season. She didn't know it would also be the stage of her destruction. The reveal. The ballroom sparkled with diamonds and laughter when the screens lit up. At first, everyone thought it was part of the event, a presentation, maybe a highlight reel. But then came the voice, my father's voice, the recording we had found in his old journal. His words echoed through the hall. Clarissa is not Jolia's real mother. She has deceived us all. I fear she has corrupted everything I built. Gasps rippled through the crowd, heads turned toward Clarissa, whose face drained of color. She tried to cut the feed, but it was too late. The screen flashed with documents: birth, records, financial fraud, evidence of bribes, photos of her with offshore partners, testimonies from people she had ruined. Every skeleton she had buried was dragged into the light. And then, the final blow. A photo of me and Aram together, smiling side by side. Not as a scandal, but as proof. Proof that love had survived her lies. The crowd turns. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Whispers turned into shouts. Donors stormed out. Politicians made frantic phone calls. The media, hungry for blood, swarmed the ballroom, snapping photos of Clarissa as she stood frozen, her empire crumbling in real time. Stood beside her, calm, composed. For the first time in my life, I was the one holding the power. "You should have let us be," I whispered to her, so quietly only she could hear. "But you couldn't, could you? You had to destroy us. Now it's your turn." Her eyes burned, with hatred. But beneath it, I saw something else: fear. The aftermath within days, the fallout spread like wildfire. Her businesses were investigated. Her accounts frozen. Allies deserted her, one by one, each trying to save themselves. Investors pulled out, leaving her empire in ruins. The press feasted on the scandal. Headlines screamed about the billionaire's biggest lie and queen without a crown exposed. And through it all, Aram and I stayed one step ahead, feeding the flames with more evidence, more secrets. Clarissa had wanted to control the narrative. Now she was the villain of every story, the face of defeat. The last time I saw her was not in a mansion or a gala hall, but in a courtroom. She sat, hunched, her perfect hair disheveled, her eyes sunken. The woman who once towered over me like a shadow now looked small. When the judge read out the charges, fraud, embezzlement, perjury, she flinched. The world she had built on stolen bricks had finally collapsed, and as they led her away in handcuffs, our eyes met one last time. For the first time, she wasn't looking at me like I was her pawn. She was looking at me like I was her executioner. A new beginning. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved in my face. But for once, I didn't feel like the caged bird on display. I felt free. Aram stood beside me, his hand brushing mine. After years of lies, prison bars, and broken dreams, we were finally on the same side again. The world would never be the same. Neither would we. But at least now, we were free to write our own story. One not scripted by greed or power, but by us. And Clarissa, she got exactly what she deserved. When the dust settled, it was almost surreal. For so many years, Clarissa had been the center of my world, the tyrant, the puppeteer, the monster in the shadows. And now? She was nothing but a name in the headlines, a disgraced billionaire who had fallen harder than anyone thought possible. Clarissa's downfall rippled across every corner of her empire. The hotels she once boasted about were seized in fraud investigations. The factories that carried her name were auctioned off to pay debts. The charities she had paraded for publicity collapsed overnight when the truth came out about stolen donations, and the so-called friends who once clung to her now vanished like smoke. High society didn't tolerate weakness. In their world, Clarissa was no longer the queen. She was the cautionary tale. She tried, of course. From her prison cell, she attempted appeals, begged for sympathy, claimed she was the victim of conspiracies. But no one believed her anymore. The mask was gone. The monster underneath had been revealed. My own chains, but revenge, as satisfying as it was, didn't erase the scars. For weeks after, I woke in the middle of the night, gasping, The memory of Aram's arrest replaying in my mind. Sometimes, when I looked at him, I saw the boy dragged away in handcuffs, and guilt would gnaw at me. "Don't," he told me once, catching the look in my eyes. "Don't blame yourself. We both paid the price, but we both survived." He was right. We had survived, but survival wasn't enough. I wanted to live, truly live. Choosing love, not wealth. For the first time in my life, I had the freedom to choose my own path. And I chose Aram. We didn't move into mansions or penthouses. Instead, we built something small, something ours. A cafe by the seaside, filled with warmth and laughter, a place where no one cared about last names or bank accounts. It wasn't about riches anymore. It was about peace. About waking up next to the man I loved, hearing his laughter, feeling the weight of his hand in mine. That was wealth Clarissa could never touch. Looking back now, I realized something important. Revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about reclaiming the pieces of yourself they tried to steal. Clarissa stole my childhood, my love, my identity. But in the end, I took them back. She sits behind bars, a shadow of her former self. And I walk free, no longer her puppet, but my own person. People often ask me if I regret it, if revenge was worth the cost. My answer? Every single second. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the system. Sometimes you have to create it yourself. So that's my story. How a billionaire's lies tried to destroy me, and how love and revenge finally set me free. And if you've read this far, I have to ask, what would you have done in my place? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more crazy revenge stories.